Welcome to the Brain Over Binge podcast, where you learn a simple, brain-based approach to ending binge eating. I'm Kathryn Hansen, author of Brain Over Binge and the Brain Over Binge Recovery Guide. I'm so glad you're here, and I hope that this podcast will provide the ideas and the insights you need to help you end your struggle with food. Today, I'm happy to share a recent conversation that I had with Marcus Kain. Marcus has been on the show a few times already, and I always look forward to our conversations because he brings such a thoughtful, compassionate, and well-balanced perspective to everything that we talk about. Marcus overcame his own 15-year struggle with an eating disorder, and now he helps others do the same. And he also works with people to change their relationship with exercise. I'll link to our prior conversations in the show description, which mostly center around fitness as it's related to recovery. The conversation that Marcus and I had for this episode is a little different, and it's a topic that I've been a bit hesitant to discuss because, as we'll say in the episode, there's simply so much that we don't know at this point. But we're going to talk about semaglutide medications and other similar GLP-1 medications that are being prescribed more and more in the world of weight loss, compulsive overeating, and binge eating. This episode is definitely not about promoting these medications or giving medical advice. And this is actually the second time that I've discussed these medications in detail on the show. The prior episode was in 2023 with eating disorder specialist and registered dietitian Robin Goldberg. That was episode 131, titled Ozempic and Eating Disorders, and I've linked that in the show description. In that episode, we primarily talked about the risks and the dangers of these medications to people with eating disorders. And this episode is going to take a slightly different angle. Marcus and I open up a more balanced discussion, one that reflects the nuanced reality that we've seen unfold over the past couple of years. My views have shifted and evolved in some ways, and although I still stand behind what I said in episode 131, and I absolutely believe that these medications carry significant dangers, especially for those with a history of restrictive eating, and I still have strong concerns about side effects, I've also seen that when doctors and patients use them extremely responsibly and carefully, they can have some potential benefits for certain people. Before we dive in, I want to make something very clear. Countless people have fully and completely recovered without the use of semaglutide medications or similar medications, including myself and including Marcus. But as Marcus says in our conversation, it's really important to check our own biases. And I've definitely had my own biases in relation to these medications, primarily due to my fear that they contribute to people depriving their bodies of enough food, but also because I've seen so many people take control and recover fully without these medications. And therefore, I don't like to see people risking dangerous side effects when it's possible to do this without taking that risk. But I do need to listen when people tell me they have been helped by the medications or that they've had a positive experience or noticed some benefits in relation to recovery. So this episode is really an attempt to hold space for both realities. The reality that there are risks, but also that there are some real therapeutic effects for some people. Marcus and I are not recommending any particular path. I have never suggested that anyone I work with try to get prescribed these medications, and I don't plan to ever suggest that, and that is not my role anyway. But if someone tells me that they have decided to take semaglutide medications or any medication under the supervision of a doctor, I always support them and help them continue to work through the goals of recovery and also help them to avoid depriving the body of enough food. I hope this conversation gives you a balanced perspective and some new information and a deeper understanding of some of the complexities surrounding these medications so that you can make informed decisions about what's best for you. And one final note is that when Marcus and I refer to these GLP-1 medications as being new, we're talking specifically about their newer use in the context of binge eating and weight loss. We understand that these medications have been around for quite a while in the treatment of diabetes. And now I'll go ahead and share my conversation with Marcus.
It's awesome to see you again, Kathryn. I've been really looking forward to chatting with you and hearing about your perspectives on this. From a boots on the ground perspective, we all kind of know what different doctors and professionals within that industry have been saying. Obviously, opinions are mixed, information is mixed, but from a boots on the ground perspective, someone who works one-to-one with people all the time with food, what are you noticing since the rise of these weight loss drugs?
That's a big question. I'm really glad you asked me to come on to talk to you. This kind of came about after you made a very insightful Instagram post kind of about these medications and their effect on sort of the food noise that people experience. And
Mm,
I responded and we're like, yeah, we should talk about this because it's such a new thing and it's creating so many effects that many of us, we just have more questions than answers at this point, So I'll definitely share some things I'm noticing and some things that I have opinions on, but all this is very multifaceted. So I just kind of wanted to say that up front. From sort of that boots on the ground perspective, like, yes, I do see more people coming to me that are on these medications or maybe wanting to be on these medications. I've seen mixed results, as far as the binge eating is concerned. Like, I am primarily focused on helping people stop binge eating. I do not promote weight loss. Like, yes, weight loss is typically an outcome that happens after someone stops binge eating in a very natural way, a very sustainable way, after they eliminate that real extreme excess of the binging, but I don't coach people on weight loss. So people come to me, that are taking this, that are maybe losing some weight because of it, that maybe have some effects as far as like reducing the binge eating episodes or reducing some of the food noise, like the constant thinking about food. But I also have some people who like say, hey, I'm taking this and it's actually not fully stopping my binge eating episodes. Maybe it's stopping some of the food noise or helping me lose a little weight, but it's not actually completely taking care of the binge eating. Some people have used it, like stop binging for a little while, come off of it, binge eating has come back. I haven't had like a ton of clients with it. I would say maybe like 10 to 15 at this point who, have had some experience with the medication. So it's not something I'm talking about every day, but also just like being in the space of maybe not working with someone directly, but having people email me or make comments on Instagram or like just hearing about it kind of all over the place. So yeah, I just want to be upfront that my experience with it is a little bit limited, but I still am hearing about it, seeing it, and have, definite opinions on it.
yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes absolute sense. And I'm feeling very much the same way. I'm noticing a lot of mixed results, again, from a boots on the ground perspective, working with people. I was really concerned when I heard a representative of Weight Watchers last year in 2024 start talking about how these drugs are a miracle for food noise, because my first thoughts were like, what the hell? We've got a large corporation or large company that's been perpetuating behaviors and strategies that are at the core of what causes food noise, now turning around and saying, hey, we've got a drug that can fix this. And I was kind of like, you fucking, you're causing it. You're causing it. It's like the
Yeah.
bit of like the arsonist and the firefighter kind of like being the same person in that particular context. But outside of that context, I've also worked with a lot of people who found that, they weren't actively engaged in weight loss. Maybe they were maintaining for a while. Maybe they had a history of weight loss and were trying to break away from it and were really struggling with that. Also struggling with binge eating and a lot of food noise. And these drugs did genuinely help them. So I've definitely noticed this mix of different results. I've seen people get great outcomes. I've also seen people say to me, I've experienced a little bit of nausea and nothing good has happened whatsoever. So, yeah, I'd love to hear more about maybe some examples of what you've noticed, like what people have come to you with, what you've been seeing.
Yeah, like so for a specific example, well, let me back up a little bit. In my approach, the brain over binge approach, I really focus on two things with clients in learning how to dismiss the urges to binge, like really learning how to have those experiences of craving and over desire for food in the form of binging and not act on those urges. So that's the one big part of what I do. And then the other part of what I do is helping people eat adequately, helping people really learn how to eat enough food. And as you just touched upon, that is a huge reason for the food noise, right? Like when we're depriving our body of enough food, it's pretty well, researched and known concept that we turn on this survival response in our body. It increases hunger, it decreases fullness, it makes us think about food all the time. So to stop binge eating, you really have to do both of those things. You have to learn to eat enough food, and you have to learn to dismiss the urges to binge, which can become habitual, like even if you are eating enough. So like I have someone who I think of in particular is like really learning how to eat enough food, really learning how to eat adequately, feeding the body, and is still just struggling with like that real extreme over desire for food and not really able to capture their sense of choice in those moments of wanting to binge, and found that taking the medication like turned it down just enough where she was able to capture that sense of choice in those moments.
Mm.
So I that was probably the most powerful one where I was like, "Oh wow, that actually is a beneficial way to help yourself dismiss urges." Like I always tell people, if something helps you in one of those two areas, like in the area of dismissing urges, if something helps you, whether that's anything, stress reduction, movement, the way you're eating, like if anything helps you dismiss urges, use it, right? I've had people on Vyvanse, right? Vyvanse is the only FDA approved medication for binge eating itself. And people have been helped by Vyvanse. I mean, again, not necessarily always a long term solution, but it can turn down that impulse enough, or maybe even help with some of the extreme appetite, like overstimulation of the appetite, that results from dieting that maybe isn't fully fixed by eating adequately, if that's making sense.
Mm.
So, like, just if there can be a little bit of help in any area, including medication, that helps you with dismissing urges, I think it can be a beneficial thing. Now, there are also potential risk factors, side effects, ways that it might interfere, like with your mindset as far as overcoming body image issues and things like that. And I'm sure we're going to get into all that. But I
Yeah.
think what I'm trying to say in summary is that I've seen it help people dismiss urges. Like when they feel like, oh my gosh, I feel so out of control. I don't feel like I have a sense of choice in the moment. It gives them just enough of a boost to be able to dismiss those urges. Maybe it's turning down the urges too, right? Like making them not quite so powerful. But I think that you still have to practice that skill of dismissing urges. Like what I've found is that even though someone may be on the medication, it doesn't fully eliminate the urges. So you still get that practice. You still are able to have some moments where you learn to capture your sense of choice. But it just gives someone that boost. And again, like it's not just the weight loss medications, it can be like something like a Vyvanse or something, another form of medication that helps someone in those moments.
Refresh my memory. Is Vyvanse an SSRI?
It is a stimulant, like a
Okay.
ADHD
Oh, yes,
medication,
that's it. It's an ADHD medicine. Yeah, sure, for sure.
but it also has effects on some effects on appetite regulation. So yeah, I mean it's the only FDA approved medication for binging. And so these other, if someone is being prescribed, the GLP-1s for binge eating, it's really an off-label recommendation. This is not a FDA approved for binge eating itself.
Mm.
And there's really, and I've been kind of trying to look into a lot of the research around it, and there just isn't a lot at this point. And I kind of wanted to say, as we're early in this conversation, that there's only been, to my knowledge, just limited studies. And I actually got the National Eating Disorder Association statement on it because I feel so a little bit inept like when it comes to this, and I really, because it's so new, right? And there's so much we don't know. So it
Yeah.
was actually validating. I was on the NEDA website this morning, the National Eating Disorder Association, and they said the same thing, like we don't know.
Yeah.
It says there's been very little research done on the impact of taking GLP-1s in people with eating disorders. So the short answer to this question is we don't know yet. It says the
Mm.
few studies that have been conducted show mixed results. Some found it may decrease binge eating episodes for those with BED, binge eating disorder, or bulimia. However, the studies have very small sample sizes and only measured the effects of the drugs after 3 to 6 months, so we don't know long-term outcomes. And then there was another randomized control study on patients with binge eating disorder that demonstrated the patients did not experience any change in their eating disorder behaviors. So like they're kind of saying what we're saying. Like we don't
Yeah.
know, and it helps some people, it may not help some people. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of bring that in as well.
It's interesting that you mention Vyvanse, like with Vyvanse being a stimulant. And obviously, those kind of medications, if someone doesn't have ADHD, prescribing Vyvanse to help with binge eating disorder, well, that's a whole other thing as well, because taking a stimulant can have some effects in terms of the nervous system, like long term, and
Yeah.
potentially carry over into problems with sleep and all this kind of stuff. So it's like that piece of content that I released that you mentioned earlier in this conversation. I referenced SSRIs in that,
Hmm.
like antidepressant style medication, because I've definitely noticed a few people that I work with mixed results. Some people use SSRIs, doesn't affect their relationship with food, or doesn't help them with binge eating at all. Other people start using SSRIs and it takes the edge off just
Yeah.
enough to be able to navigate urges and navigate feelings and stay a bit present with experiences and feelings that otherwise would have felt just too big to navigate through. So that was an interesting kind of parallel that I started to notice around these GLP-1s, these weight loss medications, that in cases where they are successful, they seem to offer a window of opportunity to do the work, to
Hmm.
kind of like hold the door open for someone to maybe take some really positive steps that they otherwise maybe weren't able to do in the same way that SSRIs or other drugs that help with mental health have, I mean, I don't want to say have never been sold as like a band-aid solution, because I'm sure someone out there has, but the most responsible physicians and doctors that I hear from and that I'm connected with always say that those kind of drugs, they're meant to support the building of good habits and new behaviors and all these kind of things. They are not a replacement for. And I feel like we're in a phase where we don't have a lot of long-term studies, or these GLP-1s are fairly new,
Hmm.
but I feel like we're seeing a similar trend where positive outcomes seem to be associated with people who might be using them as a window of opportunity to take the edge off some of the harder parts of their experience in
Yeah.
order to do the things that maybe they weren't able to connect with quite as well otherwise. I can't say that that is like absolutely 100% the case for everyone, but in the people that I've worked with, the things that I seem to be hearing, that seems to be a trend that I think I'm noticing.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's really smart of you to point out that this is not a band-aid. This is something that can support you in possibly, depending on risk benefits in the implementation of new habits, in the implementation of a different mindset, right? You have to be, like you said, willing to do the work. And if this is something you find supports you in that, and you're not just using it to be like, oh, I'm going to take this pill to, or not pill, I'm going to take this injection or whatever you're taking to have this quick fix or to lose weight fast. Like, that's not the mindset that gives people success. The
Mm.
mindset that gives people success is, hey, I'm recognizing that I'm doing the things and I'm just not making progress. I'm having so much trouble. And it can be a bit like demoralizing. In, like I was talking about before, if someone feels so out of control with these urges and is really eating enough already and feels so frustrated by that, it can be something that can give them a little boost or a little momentum, right? To feel successful in those moments and to actually feel like they have control. Again, whatever type of medication or whatever type of therapeutic approach helps you do that. I don't think that's a bad thing, and I don't think we should be shaming people, at all. And you've definitely touched on that on your Instagram. Like, people have the right to be able to work with their doctor to determine solutions. But if it's used in sort of that wrong way, or the way that has a potential to bring more risk, is if it's just taken as like, I'm going to take this and lose weight fast. I'm going to take this as a way to
Mm.
really put myself in a calorie deficit and not eat enough, and really perpetuate the problems that led to the binge eating in the first place. That's where I think, in my mind, it gets pretty scary.
That is a potentially really scary avenue, like the role that it can play in exacerbating some of these issues, especially like with body image. Like we know
Mhm.
that if we're stuck in a real spiral with body image and we're overvaluing body image, and that's such a loaded thing to say, because obviously depending on the size and shape of our body, if we go out into the world in 2025, we're going to have a different experience. So it's difficult to say, oh, you overvaluing the size and shape of your body. That's subjective because someone might say, well, when I was a different shape, I was treated differently. So I don't know if I am overvaluing it, but I use that term very much like as the clinical definition, like the overvaluation of weight and shape, where we're putting so much stock in the size and shape of our body to the point where it's having like negative outcomes on all these other areas of our lives. And how much that can actually perpetuate food noise and struggles with food if someone is in that position using something like a GLP-1 or any kind of like weight loss medication to kind of further double down on that, it sounds like really dicey territory.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Because so much of what we do is to try to help people accept their weight. Because when you accept their weight, that their body shows up when they are moving it in an appropriate way that feels good to them, when they're eating enough. Like we're not saying, and we've talked about this before, I think on my podcast, is we're not telling people to accept sort of the unhealthy version of yourself. Like you can accept that that's where you are now and you can have compassion for yourself, but we're not saying you have to, accept yourself as a binge eater the rest of your life and that's just the weight you're going to be. No, like we're want to help you accept that sort of healthy version of yourself. But when people are using these medications to reach an unhealthy weight for them in the direction of like losing too much weight too quickly and using it to overvalue their appearance like you're talking about, yeah, it really perpetuates that harmful mindset that leads to eating disorders in the first place. So then you come to the dilemma of these are meant to be long-term medications. So does someone keep taking this and keep perpetuating that harmful mindset? I mean, that's really scary to me. Or if they come off the medication and they haven't done the work, then that those survival instincts are going to take over again, and then binge eating just comes right back. So the
Mm,
body, like just because you can suppress these medications seem to suppress that their body's natural like survival response to not being fed enough, which I keep using the word scary, but that scares me, right? Because the binge eating most of the time results from that adaptive response to starvation. Like you're not feeding your body enough, your body reacts. And yes, binge eating is not the solution to that. Eating more on a consistent basis throughout your day, that's the solution, but that's your body's way of trying to protect you. So when the medications kind of quote unquote allow someone to stay in a calorie deficit without that survival response of the extreme food noise, the extreme appetite, the things that are meant to protect us from starvation. When we shut that down, it just leaves us in a place that I just definitely never recommend people take using these medications that way because we shouldn't be suppressing our body's natural survival response.
mm. The capacity for extreme calorie deficits with this stuff is it's pretty intense. I've definitely noticed that with some of the people that I work with, and I've honestly been trying to check my bias in this space recently. I've been trying to ask myself, do I believe what I believe, or do I suspect what I suspect around this topic because I'm personally invested, like my career is all about helping people with skills and practices around nutrition, fitness, strength, longevity, stress management, and everything like that. I had to ask myself a few times, am I looking for information or a perspective to support the fact that I'm still relevant? Or, like, to play devil's advocate here, have I been replaced by these drugs? The South Park episode springs to mind. They took our jobs. I don't know if anyone gets that reference, but I've done my best to really ask myself that question, and I keep coming back to what I'm seeing with the people I work with, where, for example, a gentleman uh, who started taking these meds probably 4 weeks ago now, who's been working with me for some time. We have stopped working on some things as a result of him starting Manjaro, I think it is. but we've had to completely pivot and shift our focus in a whole other direction to essentially make sure he's eating enough.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
he tracks his calories. Not everyone I work with tracks their calories. I leave it up to the person and I make recommendations. As with anything, for some people it's helpful, for some people it's not. But this gentleman tracks his calories. He wasn't tracking them before starting this medication, but started tracking them after because we noticed just how little he was eating. And it has become this case of saying, like, mate, we need to be hitting targets for eating enough. Otherwise, you're going to end up looking and feeling like a prisoner of war. Like
Yeah.
this is no longer about um, you know, how do I make sure that I don't eat chips every 5 minutes or whatever? For him, it's become more about like how do we emotionally regulate around this idea of like, I need to plan what I eat. I need to actually make sure
Mhm.
I'm getting good food. I need to put this stuff in practice so that I'm getting enough of what I need now. And
Yeah.
yeah, I've definitely seen that come up. Like for some people, the challenges haven't disappeared with these medications. Now they're just different.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, it's great to hear you say that you're really working with people on making sure they're eating enough on these medications because that's a big thing even in, let's step away from the binge eating space for a minute. Like with medically, that's what they're telling people, right? Because you have the tendency to lose too much muscle. And we
Mm,
hear about the effects of that, which actually then works against you because when you lose muscle, you slow down your metabolism and all that. So, I mean, they're even telling people that, of course, that's one of the big things in the medical community. So, and I think it's a huge thing in the eating disorder community, right?
mm,
Like it's so important that people who got into these situations with eating disorders by not eating enough, that they don't just go right back to not eating enough. So, yeah,
yeah.
it's huge.
I'm really curious about what you've noticed with people who have maybe started using these medications and are still drawn to binging. I'm wondering if
Hmm.
you're noticing any patterns or any common ground amongst people who have started the drug and essentially have kept binging through that experience.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think it's that sort of habitual element to it and the pleasure pathways involved. I mean, I say pleasure kind of in quotes because we all know it's
Mm,
ultimately not pleasurable. It ultimately ends in pain, but you get this sort of habitual drive to it. And even though, let's say, your appetite's lower overall, you're not quite feeling that same pull toward food, you still have this pull toward that habitual nature of just kind of checking out and eating all the food you can. And it's just, I feel like there's just still a draw for people. And it's interesting because I have a personal experience with this, like not these new medications, but in my book, I wrote about an experience on a drug I was prescribed off label. And I don't know if you remember that in my book, but way back when I was binge eating, I was prescribed topiramate, which was like an anti-seizure medication at the time. And I mean, it is still, but it was prescribed off label at the time for binge eating. And it like made my urges kind of go away for a little while. It lasted about 3 months and then they came back, like, even though I was still on the medication. I won't get into the whole story, but the point is, like, I actually was still binging a little bit too. Like, even though it really improved it overall, it helped sort of my appetite regulation, it helped the binge feel less appealing. There was still this pull toward it. And I think it's from that habitual like pathway in your brain where your brain and body still somehow feel like you need it. And although I did it so much less, I mean, it went from like 3 or 4 times a week to maybe once a week or once every 2 weeks, like there was still that pull. So that's kind of what I'm seeing, and I've experienced it myself. So I can relate to it for sure. And like I didn't do it correctly as far as using this medication the right way because I never really learned how to dismiss those urges, how to be with those urges, how to not act on those urges. So, like when they came up, even while I was on the medication, I still acted on them. I
mm,
can think back now and say, okay, if I knew a lot of the skills that eventually helped my recovery, I could have learned to not act on those urges that were coming less. And I could have really gotten practice and then eventually weaned off the medication. And if the urges got stronger again, I would have those skills, but I didn't. So when the urges came back, I just started acting on them. And I feel like that's a whole different topic is we're teaching people like you need a medication to turn off your urges, which like we've been talking about can be helpful. But I think we also need to be teaching people, hey, like these urges don't have to control you. You can learn skills to not act on them in the moment.
Yes. And I identify with that so much personally. I know that definitely in my own journey, even after I started eating, quote, enough, the mindset of diet rigidity, restriction, the mindset of binge eating and everything that came with that, the degree of focus and kind of self-critiquing that I was still doing around my body, all of that stuff was so strong still, even after I'd started eating, quote, enough calories, that a whole lot of the more troubling and self-limiting stuff like binge eating was persisting. And it was about so much more than just getting enough food in. And I think, like, obviously, I've never been on a medication to help with binge eating, but if some of these medications address the physiological side of things, maybe hunger cues, whatever it might be, I can totally understand how, for some people, the mindset of binging and everything surrounding it would perpetuate it very much.
Yeah.
And I know that that took me a while to kind of untangle all that. And it brings me to something else that I think about as well when people say, uh, this medication has stopped my food noise. I'm like, great. I I also don't experience food noise anymore at all. And I don't want to give anyone the impression that I'm that guy that says, "Oh, you should do it without medication." I just want you to know that it's possible to do it without medication. Maybe in a lot of circumstances, like before you kind of put up your hand and say, this is driving me crazy, I'm stuck doing this, it'll never be any different, I'm going to be this way forever unless I get medication. Ask, like, really, like, heart to heart with yourself, honestly, are you doing any of the things that are known to perpetuate food noise, like the labeling foods as good or bad, trying to stick to a really rigid diet, constantly body checking and looking at yourself in the mirror, and constantly researching dieting and trying to find like diet hacks, trying to compensate for food choices by, exercising or purging or whatever that might be. I could go on with this list, but if you're feeling like this is just not ever going to go away for me and I've tried everything, I want to ask as compassionately as possible, like, really, have you tried drawing some really clear lines in the sand around the things that we know for sure perpetuate food noise, around the things that we know for sure contribute to binge eating? Because I thought that I was stuck in that forever. And again, I wouldn't want anyone hearing this to think that I'm saying, oh, you shouldn't use medication. Use what works for you. I would never tell someone who's going through mental health struggles that they shouldn't use their SSRI or their anti-anxiety medication or anything like that. I think it's a really toxic narrative that's out there where people are saying, oh, I did it naturally, therefore you should do it without medication. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying, like, don't commit yourself to feeling like this is a forever thing that needs medication while you're still actively doing a number of the things that are known to cause the problems that are at the center of your suffering.
Yeah. Yeah, all that is really insightful because when you do the work to address the things you're talking about, that food noise does go away. And I think it takes patience, right? And I think we are in a society now who we kind of want things to be fixed more quickly. And again, I agree with you that do what works for you, do what helps you, but do know that in the long term, if you address these things and you learn to feed your body enough and you eliminate that deprivation and you learn to accept, do some work around body acceptance and self-compassion, all these things, the food noise does go away. And I think like food noise, I feel like we could do a whole huge podcast on that itself because like, yes, you said your food noise went away, and I believe that for me too, as far as like the food noise I thought was problematic, but we should like food, right? We should look forward to food. We
Yeah.
should want pleasurable food. Like, so
True.
depending on how we're defining food noise, I might still have some food noise, but I don't define it in a problematic way. I just think it's healthy and normal to want and like and enjoy food. So I think there's also a danger in turning off food noise, right? Because food noise, like even if we're defining it in a problematic way, like, okay, this is a problem, this type of food noise is a problem, it still could be trying to signal the body that something is wrong. Like, one, you're not eating enough. Two, there could be nutritional deficiencies. Three, there could be issues with your microbiome. You know, you could have a hormonal problem, thyroid problem. Like, the food noise could be a signal that you need to address things. And when we just shut it off, we lose that signal. And
Mm.
I think that is something we need to look at as well.
I think that's a really important thing to bring to light, that it's actually normal to some degree to be thinking about food. Food is
Yeah.
important. And you and I have spoken to experts in the field of OCD and intrusive thoughts on our podcasts before. And what we understand about OCD and intrusive thoughts is that the more we label what we deem to be intrusive or bothering thoughts as a problem, the more we
Mm-hmm.
stress about them, the more they come up. So if someone is experiencing like normal thoughts about food,
Mm-hmm.
but feeling stressed by that and going, oh my God, I shouldn't be thinking about food. I just ate. Why am I thinking about food again? Then, according to what we know about the experience of intrusive thoughts and how they get reinforced and how they start to spiral, if you're doing that, if you're labeling normal thoughts about food as something to stress about, could be creating,
Mm-hmm.
what we call food noise.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the moment we say don't think about zebras, or if you think about elephants, you're a bad person. Like, what do you like?
Yeah.
It's so, yeah.
Yeah. And then in the world we live in, right, we have so much pleasurable food around. So I think naturally we're all going to have a little more food noise than if we lived back in, hunter-gatherer days. Like we're all wired for food scarcity in a way, like the way we evolved. And we're now in this world where there's food pleasure everywhere. So we may all think about food more than we have to, or more than we would otherwise. But I don't think labeling that as a problem, like, yes, there are times that it is a problem. But I think when we say, okay, because you're thinking about food, something's wrong with you and you have disease and you're powerless, I don't think that's necessarily a good thing. We should teach people like, hey, yeah, these are desires and you can learn to channel them in healthy ways. I was thinking about this the other day in terms of like the way our society is with like sexualization of society and like
Yeah.
porn and stuff, and like we're kind of wired not we're wired for more of scarcity, I guess, in that area, and then just like everywhere, right? So we might all have more thoughts about it, and I don't know if that's like so then the solution, let's say, to people with porn addiction, sex addiction, isn't just to like shut off the healthy sex drive. It's
Mm.
to like learn to channel it and dismiss the urges for the unhealthy behaviors and thoughts. So like if you turn it back to food, like we're kind of shutting down our normal food desire, whereas that food desire is healthy, right? Just like a desire for sex is healthy. It just gets channeled in the wrong directions. And I don't think that has to mean we're out of control. Like we can learn to channel it back in healthy directions, if that makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense, and I'm so glad you mentioned that because it made me think of something the other day around the abstinence model of like food, what people
Mhm.
call food addiction, and how the moment we label certain foods as addictive, troublesome, can't have them whatsoever, I can't control these foods, therefore I need to never eat them ever again. The moment we go into that territory, we start to obsess, we start to think about those foods more, we start to
Yeah.
want those foods more. And it just seems like so many people who are so highly regarded, or at least have a lot of followers anyway, in the kind of nutrition space, are so quick to jump to abstinence from
Mhm.
certain foods as a solution. And it made me think, like, people are so willing to accept that when you say it about sugar, right? You say, "Oh, I'm struggling to moderate my intake of healthy foods." I mean, I'm just not healthy foods. I'm struggling to moderate my intake of sugary foods or fried foods. And some people will go, "Oh, well, that's it. None of that for you then. You have to stop." That wouldn't happen with, like, people
Yeah.
wouldn't take that message up quite so readily with sex, right?
Yeah.
Like, can you
Yeah.
imagine if you went to the doctor and you're like, "Look, I'm kind of struggling in the, the sexual relationship element of my marriage. Like, I feel a bit awkward and I can't communicate around it very well, and it's causing me some discomfort, and
Yeah.
it's making me want sex all the time, but then it makes my wife feel." And imagine if the doctor was like, abstinence, definitely, like,
I
you're
know,
done.
right?
Can you
I
do
know.
the response would be like, "Whoa, whoa, 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 whoa. Like, let's not be too hasty about the." And yet you say to
Yeah.
someone, "No more sugar ever," and they're like, "Righto," you know?
Yeah.
I feel like there's a double standard in there somewhere. There was something else I wanted to mention as well, which is this like Ozempic rebound thing, where I'm hearing a lot of people say, "I just want to be on it for a little while. I'm just going to use it to get started and then I'll stop." And the part of me that worked as a personal trainer for, you know, over a decade is scared hearing that, because I'm like, this sounds way too familiar. And it took me a while to realize what was going on there. It was reminding me very much of people who would come to me when I was working in gyms and say, "I just want to get off to a really quick start. I just want to lose this first X amount of weight and then I'll be comfortable. Then I'll be happy. Then I can do something sustainable." And it just set people up to start doing something that wasn't actually sustainable, obviously, but that time that then could have been spent on learning the skills and everything that was necessary for the sustainable thing, that time was then wasted doing this thing that was just to get around the discomfort of starting a little bit slowly.
Mhm.
And when people talk about, "I just want to get on Ozempic or, you know, Semiglade or what, like one of these other things and be off it really quickly," I feel a bit concerned because I'm like, I'm not sure if that's really how they work. Like, there's a lot of evidence to support this idea that they are more of a long-term solution. But I have noticed a little bit of a trend with some people, a couple of people I work with who used them for a period of time and then stopped. These people already had a decent relationship with exercise. They already were committed to skills around nutrition, and they kind of used their time with a GLP-1 as like a window of opportunity to further develop the skills necessary to get into a really good rhythm with their training, with their nutrition, with even managing distress and difficult feelings and urges and the stuff that you and I usually talk about here. Those people I noticed tend to have some slightly better outcomes. But I was looking at Oxford meta-analysis that was released in The Guardian this year, and it was an analysis of data from like 11 studies, reported that people regained all of their weight within 10 months to a year after discontinuing GLP-1 drugs. Um, Expert consensus being that I'm reading this thing at the moment. So, expert consensus being that as many as 95% experience full rebound, more rapid than with traditional weight based losses. Now, I know that sounds really dramatic, but And, part of me would love to say, see, that's why you should focus on the skills and not rely on the drugs and
Yeah.
whatever. But like, I have seen people use the drugs for a period of time and go off them because they use that window of time to actually do something really, really constructive. I've
Mhm.
seen that idea very hesitantly confirmed or reinforced by a couple of endocrinologists that I trust, that I listen to. Like, they're always very hesitant to give people hope that you can go on these things and then go off them and not experience rebound. That they will often say, like, look, if it's possible to go on these drugs for a period of time and avoid the rebound, if it's possible, then there is a lot of skill development and new habits and stuff involved in that process.
I think when you give people those statistics, it's not to scare people. It's just to remind people that this can't be like the only thing they're using to try to help themselves, right?
Mm.
They have to look at it as an all-encompassing solution. They have to look at learning to dismiss urges. They have to look at eating enough. They have to look at not using it as this like, thing that's just going to magically take it away, and they have to build all these other things. So, yeah, looking at those numbers that you shared, I think it's helpful just to kind of do a reality check because there's so much hype and it's so easy to say, "Oh, this is it. This is a solution." You see something on Instagram and, "Oh, this person lost this amount of weight and this person reduced their binge eating and I just need to take this and that's it. And I'll be done." And I think, yeah, like it's a little bit sobering to look at that and say, well, I need a plan for when I come off of it, or I need a plan if I have side effects that I can't stay on it, or if I can't afford it, right? We talk about we need to address accessibility, right? Not everyone can access these medications. So there's just so many issues around it. And I also think one thing to look at, like you talked about the emotional skills too, is that I feel like everything we talk about could be in podcast in and of itself. But someone I worked with recently really, and I had this experience too, of like took the medication, and when I was taking that medication that I discussed earlier, I realized that, oh wow, I'm actually not broken in the area of emotions. Like, I think this medication has the
Mm,
potential to teach people that, yes, emotional skills are all important, but take away the urge, and you actually can kind of navigate emotions to the best you can. Like, not perfectly. I definitely, like, when I took that medication, I still had all the problems and emotions I thought caused my binging, but it took away that urge. And in these emotional moments when maybe I would have had an urge and I would have binged, I was just kind of left with the emotion. And it was okay. And I'm not saying that's going to be everyone's experience because everyone has different levels of emotions or trauma or things they're dealing with. But I think these medications have the potential to teach people, yeah, they're not broken in the area of emotions because when you take away the desire to eat, you're just kind of left as your normal self in your normal life, and you have to just learn to deal with it the best way you can.
yeah. I think that speaks to so many people's experience of weight loss, like the people that have navigated that journey successfully, gotten to the end of it, been in their new body and realized, oh, wow, okay, cool. So the vast majority of the things that were making me unhappy before are still here.
Yeah.
Damn it. Like,
Yeah.
and I've spoken to so many people who experience that, not just with weight loss, but with their career. A great friend of mine, Brian Kearns, part of his story is that, he experienced this massive uptick in his career. At one point was, so many things that he always kind of hoped and dreamed for, and then realized, oh wait, so I still have all that same stuff tapping me on the shoulder. It's now I'm doing it in a more expensive car.
Yeah.
Like, so yeah, I think if there was one thing that I would want people to take away from this, it's that, yeah, sometimes medications can help. And for some people, they can be really life-changing. And there is no way that I would ever want to discourage someone from seeking the right kind of pharmaceutical support for themselves and their journey, because really it can be game-changing. Like, all we have to do is talk to someone who is really struggling with neurodivergence, like ADHD, before being titrated through that process of getting the right medication and just ask them how different their life is. Or, someone who's on an SSRI that works really well for them and is a good fit for them. I think these drugs strike me as a similar thing. I would never want anyone to think that I'm saying that they shouldn't be on the right meds. But I would just always want to encourage people to use the opportunity of those meds to practice the things that can really help move the needle when it comes to their health, fulfillment, well-being, longevity, like whatever label we want to put on it, because all we have to do is look not very far to find a few people that are clearly abusing these meds, like abusing these drugs. Um, there are even very public figures who are like say, oh, you don't know for sure. Okay, well, we're 90% sure, 99% sure that they're abusing these drugs, and it doesn't seem to be making them a whole lot happier. So, yeah, I'm wondering if you have any final thoughts, Kathryn, if there is there anything that you would like to leave people with today?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much around it, right? Like a couple of things that I want to maybe close with is I think this can be helpful to people, right? But on a cultural level, I think there are some real risks there. Like when we take it out of the individual and into the whole culture, I still think it's perpetuating this idea that like one, like weight stigma, right? Like health is not always correlated to weight. We need to learn that healthy bodies come in many different shapes and sizes. And I think it also perpetuates this idea that just food restriction is still the answer. And I
Hmm.
don't think it is. Like I think this medication helps people restrict food. And we talked about ways to not let it be that, right? Ways to mitigate that, ways to make sure you're eating enough, ways to not just let it be a restriction drug. But, some people are touting it as a way that we're no longer saying just reduce your food and exercise more. Like it's a way to get out of the calories in, calories out equation that's hurt so many people. But I still feel like it is, right? It's still telling people the solution is just to not eat enough or not, to go into a calorie deficit. So, and I don't even know if I'm articulating that in the right way. And there's so many more questions than answers, but I don't think, eliminating the excess of binge eating, eliminating the excess of really problematic overeating, that's not restriction, right? That's
Mm.
just learning to eat in a way that works for you. So like if eliminating that helps you lose weight and be healthier, that's great. But the weight loss drugs I think are further perpetuating the idea that calorie deficits are the answer. And if we're going to on the one hand say obesity is a disease and it has, all these multifaceted causes, but we're still going to say calorie restriction is the answer, I think we're missing a lot of things, like addressing all of those root causes. And again, I have more questions than answers, but I think we need to really encourage nourishment. We need to encourage people to nourish their bodies because as we see every day, boots on the ground, the results of calorie deprivation, right? So to have a drug that helps us further deprive ourselves of calories, get back to the word scary, it's just a little scary. So really make sure you're eating enough on these drugs. If you decide to take them, make sure you're under the supervision of an experienced medical professional, right? There's a danger of kind of getting these things on mail order and not knowing what you're doing and really having some very, very dangerous side effects. So if it's something that you're considering, you're talking to an eating disorder specialist, you're talking to a medical professional, you're being properly medically monitored, and you're not putting yourself in that calorie deficit.
So true. There's nothing that I would add to that. I agree wholeheartedly, and I think over the next couple of decades, we're going to see some interesting stuff. Another pharmaceutical that's kind of close to my heart because I was prescribed these in my 20s when I simply went to the right doctor and asked for them, definitely didn't need them, was testosterone replacement therapy and performance enhancing like peptides. I was on them for about 12 to 18 months before I was like, I'm not sure about this and stopped. When I stopped, the following 12 to 24 months was like some of the roughest of my life in terms of body image, mental health, energy levels, anything like that. Like while I found my way back to a healthy equilibrium after using a drug that I didn't actually need in the first place, just because someone was willing to prescribe that to me. And really now in my 30s or late 30s, being like older and wiser and understanding more about nutrition and training and everything, I realized that the things that I was lacking in my 20s was self-esteem, some wisdom, some understanding about proper training and nutrition, a little bit of emotional and psychological nuance, like, and it was just so easy for someone to prescribe me a drug at that point in time, so willing to as well go, oh yeah, sure, son, this is what you need. And it was the worst possible thing that someone could have done for me at that point in time. And we're going to see over the next few decades the results of all these people that are have been to see very like trigger happy doctors who hand out things like TRT very, very readily when maybe someone doesn't need them. Like I've got some clients who are like over 40 and use TRT and everything. That's fine. Every single case is different. But when it comes to GLP-1s, testosterone replacement therapy, peptides that are now being put under this umbrella of like anti-aging, we're over the next few decades, we're going to see some stuff. We're going to find out what the long-term effects of these things really are. So, yeah, it's going to be an interesting couple of decades.
Yeah, for sure. And everyone is going to have to navigate it and really determine what's best for you because I don't think there's a one size fits all solution, and I think for years in the eating disorder space, we've been told, at least I was, and I know a lot of people I work with were told you had to kind of overhaul your whole life. You had to fix all your emotions. You had to learn to cope perfectly with everything, fix your anxiety, depression. Eating disorder recovery seemed so incredibly complicated. And that I feel like perpetuated my problem for longer than it should have. And now I think these drugs run the risk of doing the opposite and making it like way too simple, but in a way that could be dangerous. Like, here, just take this drug. So before it was like, overhaul your whole life and fix all your emotions. And now it's like, just take this pill. Like, what is happening? What is happening? And I feel like the truth has to be somewhere in the middle, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not either one. And I try to make, as far as brain over binge, I try to make it as simple as possible, like dismissing the urges, eating adequately, but that requires some work, right? It's not just taking a pill, but it can include taking I keep saying a pill, an injection, whatever type of medication. It can include that if that's part of a more holistic, more all-encompassing approach to recovery.
Mm. It's been awesome catching up with you again, Kathryn. It's always a pleasure. And like I say, every time we catch up, your book was huge in my journey, and I'm always grateful to you for having written it. So it's such a pleasure to catch up with you, to hang out, to be able to chat about these things. And yeah, looking forward to seeing you again soon.
Yeah, you too, Marcus. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for listening today. You can learn more about Marcus in the show description. I've shared his website, his Instagram, and his podcast, which is called Strong Not Starving. For more help and support using the Brain Over Binge approach, you can find several resources in the show description, including my books, my online course, and information about one-on-one coaching and group coaching. And if you're looking for a free resource to stay inspired every day, you can download my Brain Over Binge 30-day inspiration booklet. And you can get that at brainoverbinge.com/inspiration-booklet. And that link is also in the show description. Regardless of the approach you're taking to your own unique recovery, I want to encourage you and remind you that you have the power to change your brain and live a binge-free life. The Brain Over Binge podcast is produced and recorded by Brain Over Binge Recovery Coaching, LLC. All work is copyrighted by Brain Over Binge Recovery Coaching, LLC, and all rights are reserved. As a disclaimer, the hosts of the Brain Over Binge podcast are not professional counselors or licensed healthcare providers, and this podcast is not a substitute for medical advice or any form of professional therapy. Eating disorders can have serious health consequences, and you are strongly advised to seek medical attention for matters relating to your health. Please get help when you need it, and good luck on your journey.